Okay, so here I am logged into my APIC. Now I've already downloaded the version of APIC that I want to move to. And in my case, I'm running 621C, which was never publicly available, to 621G, which is the official public release. So this is to say I am upgrading my APIC from an existing 621 release to a later 621 release. And I've got it ready to go in my image repository. So let's actually start the upgrade. We're clicking into controllers. And as you can see, here's the view of the new workflow that I was talking about. And things are pretty common sense here. We're upgrading the controller. We have our choice of upgrade type. In this case, I'm upgrading everything, so it's a regular upgrade. We'll pick our image. This is whatever's in our repository of the image that we want, and we'll move to the next step. Now, as you can see, it's going to go through and try to do a series of validations. Now, if you remember in earlier versions, we had this pre-upgrade validation script, this Python script that you downloaded from the Cisco GitHub repo. You moved it into your APIC and you ran this, and it validated that certain configurations and certain ideas about the state of the APIC and the cluster were in fact healthy and giving you the green light to go through with your upgrade safely. That's important to still do that step, but this workflow introduces a different way to do that. We've actually made that easier and more automatic, but I wanted to show you the failure scenario first. So what's happening here is, as it goes through all the checks, if you see any type of check that has a severity of catastrophic, that is a showstopper. APIC logic will not let you proceed until you correct that catastrophic error. So in this particular case, what is the catastrophic error? Well, in order for the validations to be correct, we have to still automatically in the background download this validation script. And as you can see, we intend to do that via Intersight. And in my particular case, because I'm running this version of code hot off the presses, we haven't yet completed the Intersight ability to automatically download, so that failed. That's okay. That might happen if you don't have your APIC claimed to Intersight or you have an air-gapped environment. You're always going to see this error, but we have a plan B. And so if it can't get it from Intersight, it will check your local repository for that particular script. Now, if I go to my repository, what do I mean by that? That's basically the image store that we have running on APIC. And as you can see, I don't have the actual script. So I need to actually update or upload that script in a specific image format that APIC will recognize in order for me to proceed. So I'm going to upload that script in the background, and I'm going to come back and we're going to launch it again. So here you see me actually updating the script. Now, it is not just a raw Python script like it was before. It's actually in a tarball and gzipped. The reason why is there's two files inside this. One is the actual Python script, and the other is a manifest that validates the version and the fingerprint of the script as valid. So you're probably wondering, well, if I can't get that from Intersight, where do I actually get that tarball and file? And what we're going to do is we're going to post this on CCO, so you can download it when you download the rest of the firmware, if that's what you like. So we're going to go ahead and click submit. It's a pretty small file, so you can see it only takes a second for me to upgrade. And you can see that everything downloaded and it's ready to go. So with that step kind of done, let's go back and restart the upgrade process just like we did before. And see what we see. Okay, you can see here that it tried to go to Intersight again and it failed. Then it did plan B, it checked the repository, and aha, it actually found it in the repository because, as you can see, we have no catastrophic severities. We have other issues, and normally speaking in your environment, you definitely want to read these issues and correct them, especially the critical ones. That will then allow you to have the safest, most successful upgrade you can possibly have. So don't ignore these things just because they're not catastrophic. They are still very important. That's the whole point of this validation script. And by doing it through Intersight or downloading it from CCO, you're always sure to get the latest version for that. I also want to point out that for all of these conditions that you see in APIC, we do provide some APIC information, or at least how to fix it. But for some of the reasons where you see like a link that says show failure details, if you click that link, it will actually show you, it will recommend locally what you could do. But if you wanted more information, more details, we refer you to our GitHub. So if I paste and go to that location, you will actually see that we've got a much more verbose set of information that you can use for many of those conditions, if it helps. So, okay, in my case, it is a lab. I'm going to live on the edge, and I'm going to go ahead and click next for sake of time. You will clearly, in your environment, clear all of those critical issues before you actually upgrade. So let's go ahead and click next and see what happens. So, of course, we still get the warning, hey, you didn't correct those things. If you still want to proceed, please be aware you might have some issues. That's just sort of a fail-safe there. Now, as you can see, I've got my 3 APICs. I've got 1 physical, 2 virtual. That's perfectly fine in 6.2.1. I am launching this, remember, from APIC number 1, and you must always launch it from APIC number 1. And when we're ready to go, we'll click submit. Now, what's going to happen here is it's going to go through and kind of prep the cluster, and it's going to do the APIC cluster upgrade in a certain order and in a certain progress, and you can track that progress. You can actually click the little down arrow there, and you can see exactly what it's doing. Now, this process, might take a couple of minutes. What will happen is once the cluster-wide checks are ready to go, it's going to go and start upgrading node number 1. Now, we're waiting for that to finish before node 1 starts its upgrade. But I am actually on the UI right now of APIC number 1. So let's take a moment and see what happens when this node goes through the upgrade process and how we can still track the successful upgrade of the rest of the cluster. So I'm going to sort of pause the video real quick, and when it gets to that point, we'll restart the video and we'll see what we see. Okay, so here we've reached the point where node 1 is telling us, hey, we're going to reboot. And what you need to do now, if you want to watch this process, is navigate temporarily over to APIC number 2 to watch the upgrade process if you so desire. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what APIC 2 looks like right now. Before I click that, it's basically saying, hey, you need to do this from APIC 1. But once I click OK and I hand over control, then we're going to see APIC 2 show us the rest. So as you can see here, I'm actually in APIC number 2. It's not really obvious, but this is APIC number 2. And as you can see, it's keeping track of the upgrade process. So it's actually seeing from the view of APIC number 2, the view of the steps and all of the things that need to happen on APIC 1. And then once APIC 1 is done upgrading, it will hand back control over to APIC 1 so that it can go and do APIC 2 and APIC 3. Along the way, it's converting the database, it's installing the new OS, it's making sure that we do this very carefully, one APIC at a time, step by step, and we don't proceed until the APIC that we're working on is completely 100% correctly upgraded, and thereby making a better overall upgrade experience. So I'm going to pause the video again just for a couple more minutes here so that APIC 1 can complete, and then when we come back, we'll see the remaining upgrades for APICs 2 and 3. Okay, so here we can see that from the view of APIC number 2, we've kind of almost reached the end. I just wanted to point out a few things. After we did the upgrade, we validated the cluster health. So we rejoined this to the cluster, made sure that the cluster did go into a healthy state. We finalized some last minute cleanup, and now we're going to, validate the cluster upgrade as the final step, but we need to update the other 2 APICs first. So it's telling us here, hey, APIC 2 is going to reboot. Go back to the GUI of APIC number 1, so we're handing back control, and then we're going to stay on APIC 1 for the remainder of the upgrade until we get to the end, so we're okay with this. Okay, so here we are back in APIC number 1, and we're watching the progress of node 2 go through the exact same thing. This one should be a little quicker because it's a virtual APIC. And then once APIC 2 gets to the, rejoining the cluster and it's healthy, it'll take us again right to the last step, and then it will do node number 3 and take us right to the last step. Once all 3 are at that stage, then it will revalidate the entire cluster upgrade end to end, make sure everything is exactly as expected for a successful outcome. So once again, I'm going to pause the video real quick. When we come back, we will be at the point where node 3 has completed, and we're finishing the last step of validating the whole cluster now, fully upgraded. Okay, and here we can see that the third APIC has completed the whole process. And now that APIC 1, APIC 2, and APIC 3 were fully upgraded, then we went back for all the APICs and we completed the last step of validating the cluster upgrade, and everything was completed 100%. So this is a successful upgrade. So here we are in the final overview. We can see that my physical APIC and my 2 virtual APICs in the cluster have all been successfully upgraded to ACI 621G as intended.